Hi, I'm Gretchen Lida, and welcome to this month's HN Reads here at Horse Network, sponsored by EquiShopper. This month, I am so excited to bring you today's author. He has this book that he has written for you has been endorsed by 4 Olympic gold medalists in different equestrian sports. He used to be a professional golfer and now does consulting work for Fortune 500 companies and many, many other professional athletes as well. So welcome him on. His new book is called Ride Big. John Haime, thanks for coming.
Hey, Gretchen, how about that cover? Do you love it?
Right? I love that cover. Can you tell? So we have to talk about the cover.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about the cover and who's on it. First of all, it's it's a pretty dynamic cover. You have McLean Ward in the middle of the cover there, jumping out of the eye in the big, which is pretty cool. And then you have below McLean on the left, you have Michael Young, and he was fantastic. So I interviewed these people, and they were contributors and collaborators on the book. So what I really wanted, Gretchen, was other voices in the book besides mine. I find sometimes, even in my own reading, I like to have other voices and other sort of narratives and perspectives and that sort of thing in a book besides just mine. And then on the other person we have is Laura Tomlinson, who I know. I was at her barn last year when I was at badminton. Well, I guess it was actually in 2019 because they didn't have one last year. But she's a gold medalist in the Olympics in 2012 for GB. In the team dressage, and she won the bronze medal that year too. So pretty amazing, really, Gretchen, to have those people. I am so honored. And when I talked to them, they were so humble and so gracious. You know, when I called Michael Young, for example, and he said, I said, Michael, would you like to, we've talked a lot, you've contributed to the book. Would you like to be on the cover? And he says, I'd absolutely be honored. And McLean Ward's words were almost exactly the same. When I called McLean, I said, hey, McLean, thank you so much for your contributions to the book. So good and all this sort of stuff. And I said, how about would you like to be on the cover of the book? And he said, yeah, I'd be honored. And Laura sort of was the same language. So, I think it's fun for a person to look at it. It's inspiring to look at the cover. And I think it'll go a long way too in bookstores. When you look at that cover, it's spectacular. So I'm thrilled with the cover. Rebecca Didier at Trafalgar Books designed that cover, and she hit a home run with it for sure.
Yeah, and don't forget, you can also pick up the book at EquiShopper, so make sure you pick it up there. If you have any questions for us, please leave them in the chat. We would love to answer questions for you. Also, don't forget to show us your hat, John.
Oh, can you see it? Okay, so this is the logo we had designed. I hope everybody can see it. This is the logo we had designed for Ride Big, and it actually is a stylized version of McLean coming out of the cover. So that is actually McLean. And I actually just sent McLean a really nice package with swag and books and everything, and he didn't know really. So I said to him, hey, McLean, this is really cool that, we use that image in our logo for Ride Big. So he's Mr. Ride Big.
Fantastic. So before we get into the meat of the book itself, I wanted you to tell us a little bit about how you went from playing professional golf to coaching equestrians.
So do you have 2 hours, Gretchen? Because this could take a while. I'll try to do the Reader's Digest 2-minute version. I grew up in the golf business. My father was a golf professional. I showed some promise in golf when I was young. When I was an amateur golfer, I was one of the top-ranked amateur golfers in the country. I went on a full scholarship, actually, to an American school, Purdue University. And when I graduated, I turned professional. And I played professional golf for 6.5 years. Now, I had a bit of an injury in the 6th year. So that was sort of the writing on the wall that I might have to move on to something else. So I did, and I got into business. I started to educate myself around a number of different things. And from the trade policy consulting firm, actually, I was working in, I developed some workplace learning programs, and I integrated the game of golf into it. So that was cool. And I got hired by a big consulting firm in the United States who asked me to deliver these programs all over the world. There was emotional intelligence, leadership, innovation. We had all sorts of different programs that we integrated into sort of the workplace learning and golf model. So I did that for about 5 years. I really honed my craft. I walked into a lot of rooms around the world and had to deliver a lot of materially around these subjects: leadership, emotional intelligence, performance, confidence, that we write about in Ride Big. So as it turns out, one of the executives that I was working for, I had moved sort of up in the ranks and I started to executive coach. So one of the executives I was working for asked me if I could help his daughter. She was struggling. She was a tennis player. And he basically said to me, just do exactly the same thing you're doing with us, with her. Now, it was more complicated than that because the athlete is different. So I went back and forth between Asia and North America for a couple of years and worked and built a model. And the model includes neuroscience and includes performance psychology, it includes sports psychology, and includes some of my executive coaching pieces, communication. It's a really dynamic model. So we used it with her and she did really well. She excelled and we got her to some new levels. So when I came back to North America, I started to get calls from agents to help professional athletes. And then I started to work with all sorts of different athletes at different levels. So right now I work in corporate. I still executive coach. I work with professional athletes. Some of the best athletes in the world are my clients. And I work with amateur athletes. I work with amateur equestrians. And I work in entertainment too. So I work with actors and bands. So it's all around performance. It's all around confidence. It's all around mental and emotional skills. So is that short enough? That wasn't 4 hours or 2 hours. That was like 3 minutes, I think. Not bad.
You did super good. The only part we're missing is the part about equestrians.
Oh, the equestrian. Okay, the equestrian. So now a friend of mine about 6 years ago, thank you for reminding me. That's sort of important. About 6 years ago now, or 6.5 years ago, I think, a friend of mine called me to ask for help for his daughter, who was a 1.20 show jumper. So I said, well, I don't know a lot about show jumping, and I don't know a lot about equestrian, but I will try my best to help her. So I went to shows. I took riding lessons. Like, I was very committed to this because I work in all sports, and typically I try to go the extra yard to understand the nuance of the sport. Certainly equestrian was a bit different because there was more nuance because of the horse. But I took lessons, I flatted, I jumped, just to get the feelings of the seat and of the hands and the legs and just what the rider is feeling. I went to clinics. I talked to the leading coaches. I went to shows with her. And then I started to, there you go. There's, I think that's what is that? I think that's either the Palm Beach Masters or I'm not sure. But it's in Wellington. Carly would know that picture for sure. Anyways, so we had some success with her. She started to do well. We built her confidence back. And then I started to work with other equestrians in dressage, in eventing, and in show jumping. And then I started to move up. We had results, and there was sort of a natural movement up. And I started to work with a few professional riders. They had some success. And that was a number of years ago. And so now we have some of the best young riders. I've been to badminton. That's Matthias. I talk about him, Matthias Trump. He's a young American show jumper. Awesome rider. And he's building back his string right now. He kind of has a young string. He had a really kind of good mature string for a while, but now he's building back his string, and you'll see him in the big Grand Prix rings soon. But yeah, and now we're working at the top of the sport and trying to help equestrians and influence equestrians. And I still work with young equestrians too, some young up and comers and those who need help and amateur riders. And it's been awesome. It's been awesome. And one thing, Gretchen, which has been really great, and it's been good for me, I needed a challenge. And I accepted this challenge of getting into something that really took me out of my comfort zone. And do I know everything about the horse now? Not necessarily, but we've helped a lot of riders, I think, the last, I guess, 5.5 to 6 years.
Fantastic. So one of the things I thought we would go over first is one of the things that you talk about, especially in the fantastic book trailer that Trafalgar put out, is the confidence crisis in the equestrian world. Can you describe the confidence crisis for us?
Well, how I know there's a confidence crisis, because every single person almost that calls us for consulting services wants to talk about confidence. Can I get more confidence? I've lost my confidence. Where do I get confidence? How do I build it back? So that's one of the reasons I know, because everybody who calls us in the first 2 minutes of calling us, they want to talk about confidence. So confidence is an issue. I think the other thing is too, just generally, and there's a number of reasons, and there's another hour of our show. But I would say just generally, I think that young athletes in general don't have the mental and emotional structure that sort of enhances and facilitates confidence. So that comes out of self-discovery, that comes out of self-awareness, that comes out of all these pieces. So that's missing. That's a missing piece. It's a missing structural piece of how to, just basically understanding confidence, and then basically how to build it. And then beyond that, how to sustain it over time, right? And I think, there's two other things. I think the whole idea of technology and our connected existence and the comparison traps and social media and riders feeling small when they're looking at social media and comparing themselves to others. And equestrian sport is very competitive in the better boots, better helmet, better pants, better shirt, better horse, better coach, better barn, all these sorts of things, right? So that plays into it too. And finally, throw in COVID, as something that's very topical, obviously, right now. And people's routines are off. They haven't been able to prepare properly. They haven't been able to train properly and develop their skills. So now they're maybe questioning, hey, do I still have what I had before? And they're just thrown out of their routine. So that's just 4 things like that I see from being around the sport all the time. But I can tell you that generally in equestrian sport, there is a confidence crisis. There's a lot of people who aren't as confident as they should be and as they need to be. And honestly, Gretchen, I see it in all sports. I work in every sport, and I see it in young athletes right now. And social media is a partial driver of this, that the confidence factor is not where it should be.
And why do you think it is that social media is making it worse?
Because I think that people post, it's like I talked about, it's like the comparison trap, where you're looking at social media and you're seeing these fantastic results of other people, and people don't typically post the bad stuff. They post the good stuff. So you have, let's say Gretchen is looking at Carly's social media page, and Carly's winning a lot of ribbons, and Carly's got an amazing horse, and Carly is winning everything, and Gretchen's kind of looking at it and saying, hey, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not doing so hot. So it maybe makes you feel a little bit small, and like you're not really focused on yourself. You're focused on somebody else and their development curve and their career in equestrian. So I talked to a lot of trainers writing the book, and all agreed that social media plays a part of it. Now, there's great things about social media too. For some of the riders, it's been amazing. I mean, obviously, the connectedness on a showground and being able to do that. And, the professional riders, too, from a perspective of promoting themselves, the sponsorship element and all that, that's great. But what I believe generally is that it often, the way it's presented, it makes the rider feel small. It can make the rider feel small.
Yeah, we don't see the bad days or the big tantrums on.
Totally right. Totally right.
Very often. not usually part of it, even though that's a part of writing every day at every level, right? I mean, sometimes you'll see somebody post like, there was one, I can't remember which Olympic rider it was, posted he would sit these bucks that were just beautiful. It looked like he planned sitting those bucks, but most people don't post those bucks because no one looks good landing them. The other thing I think we need to start with too is I want you to define confidence for me.
Well, that's easy. It's one word. I'll give you one word the way I defined it in the book, and it's knowing. It's knowing 100% in your heart that you can do it. So how do you get there? And that's what the book's all about is, first of all, understanding confidence, which I don't think probably a lot of people do understand it. It's thrown around. It's a word that's often thrown around. And, you know, if you're listening to the radio, a sports station or something like that, they're talking nonstop about things like confidence, right? He's lost his confidence. He's not confident. Oh, he's not playing well. He's not confident. And then the question of building it, how to build it. So what is the structure of it and understanding of it, and then building it? And then what are the threats? What can take it away so you're aware of those things? We just talked about one a second ago, the social media piece, the technology, which right now I believe is eroding the confidence of not only equestrians, but a lot of athletes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say that's super true. So I think so now we have confidence described. We've talked about the confidence crisis. Now to the fun part. So the big term is the title of your book, right? So Ride Big. We talked a little bit before we started the show about the term Ride Big and how you want it to be this term that's talked about in every barn. And everybody needs to know what the definition of this word is. And it just starts to become slang. So define Ride Big for us.
Well, first of all, it's easy. It's short. Ride big. That's it. Mm-hmm. It's fun, and I think it defines a way of riding that is very positive, is very confident way of riding, and essentially it's just about a confident way of riding. So, you know, in the book, I think in the first chapter, I describe the difference between riding big and riding small. And those who ride big are tall in the saddle. They're not afraid to take risk. They don't hesitate. They apply their training. They're in the moment. And they're trying to win. Whereas on the other side, riding small is almost the opposite of that, where you can almost literally see them shrink. And I'll tell you the story in a sec about how Ride Big where it came from, because I think that's important too. But riding small is shrinking in the saddle. It's hesitating. There's doubt. And it's really an athlete trying not to lose. And there's a big difference in sport between trying to win and trying not to lose. Now, let me explain where it came from. I was sitting around in Wellington with a bunch of riders at the table, and we were at a big class, a big 5-star class. And those are the classes where you see people either ride big or ride small because everything's on the line. You've got your best horse. It means something, and you're trying to win. It's not a schooling class at the beginning of the week or midweek where you're trying to, tweak a horse or something. This is your best horse, and you're trying to win. So we're sitting around and we're watching the different riders, and the riders around the table would ask me what I thought of the riders. We're just having fun. And they would say, what do you think of that rider? And I say, well, I think that rider is really riding big tonight. And they say, well, what does that mean? And we talked about what it meant. And it's exactly what we just talked about. It's a confident approach to riding. And then they'd ask me about another rider. And I'd say, that rider's riding small. And I'd say, well, and it ended up anyway that they really liked this. They liked the idea of just differentiating. It was very simple: riding big, riding small. And then they asked me how I could tell. And I said, well, after working with athletes for 20 years, I can tell who's playing big or playing small or riding big or riding small. So it's in the body language. It's in how they approach it. It's in when they come in the ring, the approach they take, how much risk they're taking. So that was fun talking to these riders about that, and they liked it. So that stuck, and I decided that with Trafalgar Square, we'd call the book Ride Big, because I think it's super simple and it just captures the whole thing, right?
Yeah, I think it really does. Early on in the book, one of the things that really stuck out to me is you talk about how even at the top level, there are still riders who don't have a plan. And having a plan is really crucial to riding big and being confident. Can you describe what a good plan looks like?
Yeah, so first of all, you have to have a vision of where you're going. So where am I going? So basically, Gretchen, my job is very simple. The athlete, when they approach me or I'm working with them, they're in a place and they want to go somewhere. So my job is to take them from where they are to where they want to go. So, in the process of working with an athlete, we create an extremely detailed, it's a big plan laid out. It's a very realistic plan, but it includes targets and steps and actions on exactly how they're going to proceed. Now, it's really important. Like, in my opinion, I see so many riders with no plan. And I've seen so many riders the last 5 years of working with the athletes who don't have a plan. And then all of a sudden I'll see them somewhere at a show or something, and then they'll be out of the sport because basically, in my opinion, they don't have the plan to get to where they want to go. So I think that, and in order to really develop confidence too, you have to have a plan and know where you're going. If you don't know where you're going, you may end up in the wrong place. So it's really critical to have that plan, and that supports confidence too. I wrote about the plan and the vision in the book as a supporting piece to confidence and a builder of confidence.
Yeah, I think once you have a plan too, it makes it better to differentiate where you're going too. If you have a plan, you're able to be to decide what's going towards. There's a great Neil Gaiman quote that I thought about a lot while reading that particular chapter, where he talks about going towards the mountain. So if it's something that, the opportunity is leading you towards the mountain that you want, you go towards it. But if that opportunity doesn't lead you towards the mountain, you avoid it, which I thought was super.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think in the book, people will really enjoy how to construct a vision. And I use examples of clients we've worked with and how we constructed their vision. And then from the vision, how do we bring the vision alive? Well, that's in the steps and the actions, the sort of the day-to-day steps and actions. So, that's an important part. All of these tools, in our screen test the other day when we were talking for a long time, right? We talked about that, and I think that's it's a really key thing. And the idea of all the pieces of the book, I had to write the chapters of the book, but everything is so connected. Like the plan and the vision are so connected to confidence, as is all the other chapters in the book.
Yeah. So one of the things that I really wanted to talk about is perfectionism.
Oh my God. Gretchen,
watching your reaction on perfectionism is great. So I want you to tell the audience what you think of perfectionism.
Well, I'm just drinking my coffee because it was a busy day. I took a hard line in the book on perfectionism because I see it as being a big deal in equestrian sport. Everybody's trying to be perfect with the perfect horse and just the perfect everything. And the reality is, Gretchen, there's no such thing as perfectionism. Sometimes it's sold to us softly as being okay. But in working in this industry, in my business, in performance, in mental and emotional skills for 20 years, there's nothing really good about perfectionism. It frustrates people. It's very frustrating. And I'm telling you that I don't see too many happy people who are perfectionists. It's a very difficult thing to live up to, primarily because it can't exist. It doesn't exist. Because you're not perfect, your horse isn't perfect, the fences aren't perfect, the course designer's not perfect, nothing's perfect. So to expect perfection is so unrealistic and so difficult, and it's a problem. It's a major problem. I really hope that every young equestrian will read that chapter, because I think that chapter, they really can take something away from that chapter on the difference between perfection and excellence, and how to construct that excellence mindset versus the perfectionist mindset. So that's an important chapter too, I think, in the book for equestrian athletes.
Mm-hmm. And how should we combat perfectionism?
The other side of it, the self-acceptance, the accepting mistakes, and creating, like I said, this excellence mindset, which is almost the opposite of perfectionism. You accept yourself, you accept mistakes, you accept that everything's not going to go perfectly all the time, and when you do, it kind of takes the pressure off a little bit. But don't be fooled that it's a lower standard of performance, because it's not at all. When I work with athletes on perfectionism and excellence, when we make the transition into an excellence mindset, the results elevate in a hurry. So they're very restricted by the perfectionism. There's a freedom and a self-expression that sort of is enabled through this excellence mindset. So yeah, it's a big one. Perfectionism is a big one in sport, especially for young athletes, for sure.
So when you're watching a set of riders and you see a perfectionist rider and you see a rider that's shooting for excellence, what are the differences?
Well, I may not know. Like I would have to talk to them. I would have to assess them, and it would be very difficult to see a perfectionist rider or an excellence rider. I could see that they're not confident, or they're riding big or riding small, but I don't know if they're a perfectionist or not until I ask questions and dig in and understand who they are and their experience, their background, all these sorts of things. So I can't really tell immediately, I would say, but I would find out fairly quickly if they are, and then there'd be work to do, certainly. Mm-hmm. If they are a perfectionist, I would try to move them towards the excellence mindset for sure.
Later in the book, there is a study that you mentioned where the athletes are put into groups. The groups there's like, this is the A group, they're the best group of athletes, and then it goes through D. And one of the things you note in that study is that those riders then end up staying, or I guess athletes is the study, but they end up staying within those categories.
Yeah, did you like that?
Why? Yeah, I really dug it. Yeah, I was
that
like,
was the golfer thing.
About this. What?
That was the golfer thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when I was growing up, my dad would ask me to write the scores down at the club championship. So I'd wait for the golfers to come in, and they were either depending on their handicap in golf, they were either A, B, C, or D golfers. So I did this for a number of years. So I started working at the club maybe when I was 13 or 14, and I worked there almost through college every summer. So here come the golfers every year. And every single year, almost the exact same golfers are either a D golfer, a C golfer, a B golfer, an A golfer. They never got any better. They never improved. And I always questioned that and wondered, how can somebody literally play golf for, 20 or 30 years, 10 years, whatever the thing, and never really improve and get better and just stay the same? So that chapter too is a really good chapter. And that's where I used Michael Young as somebody who he admittedly, he's made so many mistakes. He said he's fallen off the horse 1,000 times in his life. And that's the chapter on comfort zone and growing your comfort zone and how to do it and how to improve. So yeah, I think I love the example of the golfers though, because I sort of came to this when I was young, and then I'm all around it now. That's what I do every day. We try to grow the comfort zone of every athlete or every performer we work with.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it. I grew up going to breed shows and Peruvian pasos of all things, and I remember watching, the breeders go around, and you always knew which breeders would go in which category, and they never seemed to branch out. So when I saw that there, I'm like, I'm going to ask John all the questions. So we have a few questions from the audience. Why don't we take a look at
let's hear a few for sure. That's what we're here to do, help people.
So the first question is, who in your life, your coach, your professor, or relative, or other mentor, taught you the importance of confidence while you were a golfer? What did they teach you about sports psychology?
Oh my God. I mean, the one thing I probably didn't have enough of when I was playing professional golf was confidence. And a lot of the times, and that's the other reason I wrote a very deep chapter in the book on emotions and what they are, because I wasn't in charge of my emotions. I didn't really understand the messages they were sending me. And I was, when I played professional golf, I probably wasn't as happy as I needed to be. So I basically learned it through playing a professional sport. When I was playing a professional sport, I had the opportunity to work with great people, coaches, sports psychologists, all these types of people. And I learned about it. But the one thing I can tell you that I didn't have that did make a difference in my career of getting to, the next level. I mentioned at the outset that I had an injury. But the confidence factor for me was something that I needed more of in order to really excel and to maximize my abilities. And I felt like I didn't. I had the technical skill. I had a lot of physical abilities. I understood the game very well, the strategic part of the game. But the mental and the emotional part of the game, which in my opinion, with young athletes, is the part that they really need work and help in order to excel and maximize their abilities. So that's why I do what I do. Because I learned from my own experience, and then I went and educated myself, and now we try to help, people at all levels. And the confidence is huge. It's massive. Without confidence, it's very difficult to excel and maximize abilities.
Is there something you would tell your younger self about confidence now?
Yes, I tell them to read Ride Big. Definitely.
Fantastic.
No, one thing I would say, though, Gretchen, is two things. And this is for the audience listening. You have to have the structure. If you're a young athlete, you have to have the structure. And by structure, what I mean is the first three pieces that I wrote about confidence in the book called the building blocks. One of them is self-discovery. So in the book, go through that process. Go through the process of self-discovery. Understand yourself. Because in order to really believe in something, you have to understand it first. Otherwise, what are you believing in? So that's really key. That's one thing I did not have enough of when I was playing professional golf myself, was enough self-awareness. The second thing I would recommend, there's another piece, but I'll pass over that one right now. But the second thing I would recommend is there's a voice that's always talking to you. It's the most important voice in your life. It's talking to you 24/7. You cannot escape it. And you have to understand that voice, because that voice can sabotage a lot of performance and a lot of confidence. So in the book, I take people, I create the understanding through one of our amazing athletes, Laura Tomlinson, who had problems and who got to the top of the sport by addressing this piece and shaping and developing her voice. So that's one thing that I really want to stress. And I would love young riders to read that chapter, because I frame a process of how to shape that voice and how to extract the truth from that voice, which is ultimately what you're trying to do. So that's what I would tell myself. I would tell myself those two things: self-discovery or self-awareness, work on it, and then also understand this voice and shape the voice. Those are the first two prerequisites, and then there'd be other things, but those are the first two for sure.
Well, and she talks in that section too, which I really like, about a very difficult horse, which also changed her voice.
It did. And she overcame something, right? And she proved to the world that she could be successful on a horse that other people thought was difficult. So, and I think that really gave her the confidence, knowing she could do it. So she grew up in a family where she couldn't win. Like if she won, she should have won. And if she didn't win, oh my God, how could you not win? You've got great horses, and you've got all this money and all this sort of thing. So, anyways, the voice piece, the narrative, it's called different things: self-talk, voice, narrative. You can call it what you want, but this consciousness inside of yourself, your own thoughts, are something that you really have to get a handle on if you want to be confident.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why don't we take another question? Yeah, it makes total sense.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really clear too. So it looks like this question is, what inspired you to write this book? Thanks for the question.
Um, just to help equestrians. That's what inspired me to write the book. I had, and I'm not sure if I mentioned it to Carly and Gretchen before, I think, but we have a very busy consulting practice here, but because of COVID, I had extra time. So, people asked me, including the publisher, what I wanted to write about. And just based on my experience in equestrian sport around, all the mental and emotional challenges, I thought that confidence that's the thing everybody always talks about and wants to talk about, right? Is the confidence. I think that's a word that, it's just a daily word. So I wanted to address it and help people understand, first of all, to gain more confidence, but to understand what it is, to be able to build it, and then be able to sustain it. Because I think if you can give the gift of confidence to somebody, I mean, that's a great gift.
Yeah, I think that's a super good reason to write a book too. What was the biggest challenge about writing the book?
Oh my goodness, you have to have courage to write a book, Gretchen. The biggest challenge was trying to write a really good book, I think, because I could have written, I think, a run-of-the-mill mediocre book if I wanted to, but I wanted to write a really good book for equestrians to help equestrians, a very practical book. And I think my voice, along with the voice of some of the world's best riders, and it was, it's amazing too, the riders really were committed. The riders that I talked to, the McLean Wards, the Beezy Maddens, the Michael Youngs, Harry Mead, who just finished 5th in Kentucky in the Kentucky 3-day. All these people were genuinely wanting to help riders. So that's why they contributed to the book. They wanted to do something to help riders, and they felt like they had something to say. So that was fun. I mean, that's it.
Let's see if there's a couple more, just
to
make sure.
Let's have a few more.
So this one is from the person who asked the last fantastic question. And this is, how do you help someone who rides small instead ride big?
Well, it's a process, and if you get the book, you'll go through the process in the book. So we start essentially with the building blocks, and then we look at the tools to build the confidence. So it could be the plan, it could be extending, the comfort zone. We'll identify the threats. What are potential threats with them? We talk about all those types of threats, right? The fear, the pressure. And a lot of people have a lot of people have the wrong perspective of some of these things. They have the wrong perspective of fear. They have the wrong perspective of pressure. Perfectionism, you have to address that. If there's any sort of perfectionism in there, you have to address that. But just answering the question, though, I think it's a process. You have to work at it. And everybody, says to me, well, can I just get 3 sessions from you, or can I get 2 sessions from you? But how good of a rider would you be if you took 2 sessions to learn how to ride? Would you be a good rider? Probably not. If you went to the gym for 2 sessions, could you get in shape? No. You have to work on these things. You have to spend the time, and it's a process, and it could be months. To change habits and to build habits. It just takes time to do it. So you have to commit to it. If you want to be confident, you have to commit to it. You have to have a process to do it. And then, hopefully you make the shift to becoming more confident.
I think this also fits nicely with one of the questions that I had was, what advice do you have for amateurs?
In what way?
So a lot of the book talks a lot about professional athletes, but a lot of it seems like it would be translatable to amateurs. But let's say someone is going to their very first horse show. What advice would you have for them?
I mean, it's everything. I would say, Gretchen, that everything in the book is translatable. I mean, going to the first horse show. So let's use, and do you want to use you as an example?
Sure, you can use me as an example.
Okay, so you're going to a horse show and you're feeling nervous, not confident, whatever. So that's normal. One thing, Gretchen, that is worth mentioning is that fear is okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Equestrian sport is a difficult sport, and it is a dangerous sport. McLean Ward said that to me in the book. He said the reality in equestrian sport is that we have fear because it's just the reality of the sport, but we also contrive fear too. That's one of the things, that's the other thing about the chapter on fear that I would like people to kind of take away, is that there's sort of rational fears and there's irrational fears. And a lot of times what's driving our performance, so if you're going to the horse show for the first time, a lot of our rational fears are driving that performance. So we do the what ifs, we create all sorts of different fears or what people might think. We might look stupid, like going out for the first time. People might think that we don't look great, or we have a fear of failure. We don't want to fail. We took some lessons and then we got into the ring and there's a possibility that we could fail. So that drives a lot of people. But the only rational fear really in equestrian sport is that you can get hurt. And you can deal with that. There's opportunity to deal with that. You have to have the right horse and maybe the right coach and safety equipment. You can mitigate the rational fears. You really can. And you have to do it clinically. You have to sit down and look at, okay, what are my fears and how do I mitigate these? But, I spend a lot of time on fear with athletes, and many or most of the fears are irrational. So it's spending time unwinding those.
All right, I have more questions about fear. Before we get into those, we have one more question from the audience.
Yeah, sure.
When riding, I was aware of areas that I needed to improve on, but more importantly, I celebrated my accomplishments. That was more important for my confidence. Do you encourage that mindset?
100%. I definitely encourage that mindset, because I think that the tendency, certainly for human beings, is to, when you come out of the ring, you have this really nice ride, but guess what you focus on? The little mistake you made, or the little trip you had, or the little rub you had, or whatever, right? If we're talking about show jumping. So I think it's really critical and we have all sorts of processes around this, to reflection processes and that sort of thing, and always focusing on the positive first. Should you look at the rubs and should you look at the other things? Absolutely. But look at them later and learn from them. But definitely, I would highly recommend to look at the positive things you do. So let's say you go in the ring, in a show jumping ring, and you take one rail and, you come out, you're disappointed, but you have to look at it that you have to look at it in pieces. You had, 12 fences up, one rail down. So you really need to look at the positive piece first, the 12 rails up, and then by all means, go ahead and look at the one rail down and what happened and look at the video and everything. But I think people immediately, and I often hear coaches too, as soon as the rider comes out of the ring, there's the focus on what went wrong. So I think you need to really focus first on what went right and then focus on what went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I love what you said there. I mean, I love that mindset. Definitely celebrate your wins, celebrate your successes. I mean, you're doing or you're engaged in equestrian sport to have fun, and it should bring a joy to you. So that joy can be brought out by celebrating what you do well.
You talk about that too in the book too. Like there's a section where you talk about having fun and how if you reach towards having fun, often that you had a rider who did much better when they rode for the fun of it versus for winning.
I think you have to put the purpose and the joy at the front end first, and then put the achievement second. Often when you love something and you do it well, you're going to have success at it. But sometimes people are so hyper-focused on achievement that the joy sort of fades out and they lose the joy. So you got to be really careful. That's a really good part of the book too, I think, Gretchen, is the explanation, because part of my reason for writing the book is I want equestrians to have more fun and have more joy in what they do. So I think part of that idea, along with some other ideas in the book, can help them with that.
So I have two more questions left. They're kind of silly. But what advice do you have for riders going into 2021, along with reading your book?
So, boy, going into 2021.
I mean, it's May, so it's the next 6 months of 2021.
Well, I think be gentle on yourself. Have very sort of leveraged expectations. Don't go in expecting some big things when you've been out for a while, because that again is a recipe for sort of coming down in the spiral. So you saw in the emotional spiral the chapter on emotions, which I think is another chapter that I think is important for equestrians to understand emotions. The fact that it's a message for you essentially, and how to interpret those messages, which I think is really key. And that's one thing, like in my professional golf career, I could not do. I could not interpret what my emotions were telling me. And I think it's really key to be able to do that. But going into 2021, be gentle with yourself, give yourself a break, go slow, take it easy, build slowly. And I always tell people too, in equestrian, there's four things you need to focus on and work on. So your technical skills to build competency so you can build confidence. A lot of riders now are focusing more on physical skills. They're getting in the gym and getting stronger so they can support those technical skills. And then there's the strategic part or the tactical part, understanding the sport and maybe horsemanship, and you can put a few other things in there. And then there's the mental and the emotional piece, and you really do have to work at it and you have to spend time on it. So spend time on those four things. Understand confidence, how to build confidence. What happens? What do you have to look out for? What are the potential threats to your confidence? So when you're going into 2021, what do you have to look out for? What might the threats be that you have to pay attention to? So I would say that, Gretchen, just be easy on yourself, be gentle, go in slowly, because a lot of people are coming back. They haven't ridden a lot. So take it slow and give yourself a little bit of a break, and then set a target for yourself, a realistic target, maybe out front of something maybe you want to achieve or do, and you can hit the target if you do it properly.
Yeah, John, I think that's super solid advice. There's a lot of articles out right now that are talking about how the last year we've all been in fight or flight so much that we often don't know what it's like to that we don't really know how to regulate our emotions the same way. So going slow and being kind to yourself in all aspects of life, not just in the barn, I think is super valuable.
That comes back to the voice too, Gretchen, and really, creating and shaping a very supportive voice for yourself, because the reality is that the tendency for human beings is to be negative. It's just built into us. We're trying to always protect ourselves, right? It's the whole idea of surviving. So you really have to offset that with a really supportive, positive voice. And you have to learn how to shape that voice. It's really key. The one point I want to make here too is that this is really important, not only for their lives, and like you just said, for their lives in equestrian sport, but for everything, day to day, everything that they do. And what better way to sort of be introduced to this knowledge through your passion, which is equestrian sport, and then you can take these skills. And confidence is every day in everything we do. So take these skills that you learn in equestrian sport and apply them in everything you do. What better, greater thing for a young person, right? To be able to build some self-awareness and build some confidence, and then they can adapt it to everything they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting stuff I've been reading about right now that talks about how, like, often teenagers who have trouble regulating their emotions or seeing how their emotions affect others, that equine therapy is really effective in that.
Absolutely.
So it's effective for them. It's effective for us too. Yeah. Yeah.
It's really, I mean, they say that emotions run the show in performance, and that's the truth. That's exactly what happens. So I did spend quite a bit of time in the book on the emotions chapter, just helping people understand, okay, what are emotions? What are these things, right? How do they apply to me in equestrian sport? What do they mean? What does fear mean? What do all these emotions mean? and then how to regulate them, which I think is really having a process and some practical skills to regulate them, which I think is really key. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any more questions from anybody?
So does your book address the issues of riders who put too much responsibility on their shoulders, worrying about letting down their coach, parent, self? How do you teach a rider to let go? Yes, there's a lot of pressure, but it doesn't belong in the show ring.
Yeah, totally. Jessica, I talk about pressure in the book. I interviewed Beezy Madden, I interviewed McLean Ward, I interviewed Michael Young, and I interviewed Fred Mannix for pressure. Like, I asked them a lot of questions on different things, but one of the things was pressure. And I think you'll learn in the book that there's good and bad pressure. Now, typically the equestrian athlete creates the bad pressure. So there is good pressure. First of all, is there pressure? Like, everybody always asks me that, because sometimes books say, no, pressure doesn't exist. There's no such thing. You create all the pressure. There is pressure. If you ask any one of my top rated clients if there's pressure, there's pressure. But you have to be able to address it and consume it properly. So that's another issue, I think, in the book that's really important for people to understand. What is pressure, first of all? What is good pressure? What is bad pressure? And how can you sort of be in the good pressure all the time and ride with this joy and this self-expression versus creating this bad pressure that really frustrates you and is difficult and creates anxiety and creates all sorts of issues that are difficult to deal with. So yeah, and Jessica's question was part of that. So I'd have to talk to Jessica, and ask her some specifics about, how she's feeling about things. But I think if you understand the general concept of pressure, you can adapt it to that question.
It also sounds, John, one of the things I like that you're talking about is like the idea that if you give the devil a name, it doesn't have as big a teeth.
Right.
So if you can name the pressure, and what that pressure is and what's going to affect it or not is really going to affect how that pressure affects you. Yeah.
And you know what, Gretchen? Everybody consumes it differently. Like Beezy Madden, Michael Young, McLean Ward, and Fred Mannix all consume pressure differently. They all deal with it differently. So you just have to find out how you deal with it best. What is the way you deal with pressure? Is it downplaying it? Is it accepting it and saying, oh, this is the greatest thing. This gives everything I'm doing meaning, and this is the greatest thing. I can't wait to get out there. That's the Beezy Madden approach. The Michael Young approach would be, this is no big deal. This is just another session for me, and I'm just going to go in and do my job. And Michael's big thing was to take the pressure off his horses. So he knows that he has to be calm, he has to be relaxed, he has to be confident in order for the horse to feel that and, take the pressure off the horses. So he downplays everything. He just goes in and does his job. That's it. Mm-hmm. Beezy Madden says, this is amazing. Look what I have the opportunity to do. This is giving everything I do meaning. I can't wait to get out there. So that's a great approach too. So you just have to figure out for yourself how you're going to consume the pressure and use it in a positive way, because it's great. Like, it really can bring energy to your riding and bring energy to your equestrian life. It really can, if you do it properly.
Fabulous. My last question of the night is, what are you going to work on next?
What am I going to work on next? This is a good question. Gretchen, I just finished this. Come on.
Got to look at the next fence.
You're totally right. And like I said, I'm always sort of learning. I love learning. I learn a lot from my clients. And that's the way I do learn about what I do. I learn from other people. I learn from my clients. And what I'm going to do next, honestly, I'm not really sure. I really want to bring this book. We're there now, so I just want to bring this book to equestrians and then maybe build it out a little bit from there. But I want people to read this book because I think it can really help them with respect to the confidence. And I know that people will pull things away from this book. Like, it might be 3 things, it might be 5, it might be 1, it might be 22. I don't know. But I think that if they follow the path in the book, it can be really helpful.
Well, yeah. So your next thing is just getting the book out there more. The
I
next
think
step.
so. I think right now, yeah. And I want to, after COVID, I want to get out. I want to get in front of people. I want to answer questions like we're doing tonight about the book and elaborate on it. And I want to go to the shows, and I want to be at the big shows with some of the pro riders. And I've committed to going to badminton again next year. So we'll do a book signing and talk to some people there. So just get better at what I do. I'm always trying to master my craft, even though I've been doing this for a long time. I'm excited about the book. I'm excited about equestrian sport. It's growing. It's a fabulous sport. I love being around the horses. I love being around the people. So I've really enjoyed that part of it. So maybe a little bit more of that and less of maybe some of the other things. I'm not sure.
Fantastic. Well, we're excited that the book is out. The book, again, which we have copies of, woo-woo, see, Carla's putting it up, I've got a copy, is Ride Big. Make sure you check it out on EquiShopper. It's out now with Trafalgar. Thanks to Horse Network for having us on tonight, and we will see you next month. Thanks again, John. Have a good night.
Thank you.